We welcome you to our Unscripted Authentic Leadership podcast. I am one of your hosts, Lafayette Lane, along with my other host, John LeBron. So I'm going to just do a quick introduction here of ourselves, tell you guys a little bit about what this podcast is. And again, my name is Lafayette Lane. I serve in leadership in a couple capacities. One being in my church as a youth pastor of Go Youth Ministries. Go stands for God's Order. So we work with young people there, impacting them not only in the context of church, but in their schooling and their everyday lives. I also serve as vice chairman for a youth organization called the Southwest Region Young People's Union, which is a part of an organization of the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World. And I am also a minister at my church, the Apostolic House of Prayer. You want to introduce yourself, John?
Yeah, man. Thanks so much. So, John LeBron, my leadership experience, had some years of experience within youth leadership within the church. Since then, leadership within, business, family-owned business and so forth. And also just I spent a lot of time developing and helping young entrepreneurs in different facets, sometimes, in projects I'm working on, sometimes helping them with projects that they're working on. Just a really important thing for me is helping young men become better young men and, achieving their goals and their dreams.
Absolutely, man. That's awesome. So this podcast is just a podcast on various types of leadership, dealing socially, politically, and spiritually. And so John and I, we are good friends. I consider him a brother of mine. And so we're just going to let you guys in on the conversation that we would usually have off camera. And so we believe that this will be impactful and have an impact, especially in our world that we are in today. How are you doing, man? You doing all right?
Man, I am doing really good. So, yep, feeling good today. You?
Good, bro. I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Nice Sunday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And doing well. I'm ready to get into the conversation, man. And so,
let's do it.
We want to talk about leadership, and I kind of wanted to start off just kind of defining, kind of giving a dictionary definition, but also kind of my own definition of what leadership is to me. And truly, for me, leadership is one word: influence. And so, many times people don't think that they're a leader because they're not in a higher position at their company or a higher position. They're not a pastor of their church, and so they don't consider themselves as qualified as a leader. But the reality is that we're all leaders because we all influence someone or somebody in some form, shape, or fashion every day. And so looking at that, and then also the definition of leadership is just the art of motivating a group of people or persons to act toward achieving a common goal. So when you think of leadership, what do you think of when you think of leadership, bro?
Man, so, John Maxwell says a leader is literally just anyone with a following.
Wow.
He said that's the basic premises of being a leader. If you have a following, then you're leading. I had an old mentor. He passed away a few years. His name was Terry Taylor. And he taught me that on the same idea you mentioned before, some people don't think they're a leader. He said everyone is an example. We've seen different people in business or athletes or different people who have a large stage say, well, I'm nobody's example. And that was their excuse for being a bad example. Well, Terry always taught me that everyone's an example. You're just a good one or you're a bad one, right? There's no middle. You're a good example and bad example. It doesn't mean you're always a good, you're infinitely a bad example. I think it just goes in moments of time. And some people have more good moments than bad, and vice versa. So yeah, none of us are perfect. The goal is always to stack up those good moments.
Absolutely, man. And I love how you said about the example of the athletes, because so many times I've seen that in interviews. Athletes will say, man, I'm not a role model, and so I can just carry myself and conduct myself in any way I feel deemed, because I didn't sign up to be a role model. But the reality is that if you have any type of following, like you said, you have influence. And so that's kind of like our want to lead into our topic today about that whole piece of, well, I don't have influence or I'm not a leader. Talking about compromising leadership because someone is watching you, and the decisions that you make could adversely affect someone in a negative way and send them, you know, can change their life on a negative trajectory, or it could, have a positive impact on their life to where it can change their life for the better and they'll never be the same again. Um, Talk about that, John, about that responsibility piece in those that are in the leadership role, that we have to be mindful and cognizant of our actions, even if we feel that we shouldn't have to always monitor what we're doing or monitor how we're carrying ourselves, uh, simply because someone's watching us.
Yeah, leaders have to understand that you live in a glass house. This is how it
Mm,
is.
yeah,
Somebody is watching you. I have children, and they watch me all the time.
yeah,
We spend a lot of car time, and I teach them things. Turn the radio down, teach them little things here and there, and I really don't ever know if they're paying attention. And then every now and then, though, something will happen, and my son or my daughter, they'll say something that I had said, and I'm like, wow. I just all of a sudden you hit that moment. Like I remember saying this in the car, right?
yeah,
And so it's just like it's a good feeling. But even outside of that, as you just go through life and you lead in your church, in your company,
yeah,
just in your community, you could be in your neighborhood, right? You could be that great family in the neighborhood that just does things the right way. Yeah, and it's just understanding that you're always going to have to be that right example. If not, then I guess you'll have the bad seeds and the consequences of not being that person. But
yeah,
being a stable, I found that stability and just that consistency of being a good example allows others to lean on you when they're maybe not as strong, and especially when they have some down times. So.
absolutely. And then you just saying that just now just sparked a spark plug while you were talking about your kids and how they watch you, whether knowingly or unknowingly, and they're going to mimic what they see. And to me, just now, with the thought that came to my mind was in leadership, in order to be an effective leader or a good leader, you can't have a selfish mentality
Mm.
because it's not about you. Um, I can't remember what book it was that I read, but it was talking about that leadership is leadership.
Mm.
And that as a leader, oftentimes you are the one that's going to be sacrificing the most because it is an unselfish role. It is a role that you are always the spectacle of everybody. You're on display at all times. And if you're not careful and you have a selfish mindset, you'll be like those athletes that say, it doesn't matter because you only care about yourself. But when you realize the responsibility and the weight of that responsibility, that my actions can determine someone else's life, man, that just changes the whole game. And so when I think about that, I think about this word compromise. And I want to talk about compromising leadership. To me, compromising leadership is not from the perspective of compromise can be looked at as, well, I'm trying to find a solution that will appease all parties. But then there's another side to compromise that says, I'm willing to let down my morality, my integrity, my standards to compromise for something that I can gain personally that will benefit me personally, but it will adversely affect someone else's that's following me negatively. What do you think about when you think about compromising leadership?
It's a slippery slope, man.
Yeah.
One of the things I've always respected highly about Lafayette since we got to know was just his standards and
Wow.
principles, right? We've talked about that, and just to let the audience in a little bit with the respect level. When my wife and I talk about what if something happens to us, who are the role models we want to have in our life? Your name has come up multiple times,
Wow.
and so now as a parent, I can barely talk about my kids without getting emotional. So, it's if you're listening, you're like, oh, that's nice, big deal. As a parent, that's everything,
Yeah.
right? So just I don't know if I've told you that before, but and I
Wow.
wasn't on my notes or nothing. It just came up that Non-compromising. So I think everybody needs to start, but you have to at some time decided sort of what your non-negotiables are going to be. And I really think that comes from defining your like core principle or your core values and principles. So, for example, if you want to understand how that looks for me, we start everything off with faith, right? It doesn't have to be everybody's decision, but for me in my house, God is first. And the reason we do that is because he gives us the foundation for where everything else should flow properly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, it's my marriage, right? And a lot of people say, oh, what about the kids? And I'm like, and I learned this from a good friend named Brett. He taught me this. I had something similar, but he once defined this out better than I ever did. No. And, if the marriage isn't right, then you can't really make the kids right. If the marriage is broken, it affects the kids. And I understand there's lots of things that happen in life, but it doesn't mean that the principle is not correct, right? I'm not judging anybody if the marriage didn't work out or if their kids had to get separated. I get it, man. I've had it in family too. But it doesn't mean that the principle is incorrect. So, faith, God, then my marriage, then my kids. So my wife always comes before my kids come. And from there, it's my business. Not some people are like, well, what about your parents or your family or your friends? Well, it has to be my business because when my friends and family need something, like when a friend comes to me, it's usually for either advice or sometimes for like money or, they need help with stuff. Or I want to be a bigger blessing to the community. And you have to have your finances right to be able to do that, right? Poor people can't help someone else who's in need of financial need. So, and that's not a knock on anybody. It's just a fact. Yeah. And then comes my families and friends, and in there I would probably fit in country and stuff like that. But that's just non-compromising, standards. And so you have to have those in place. And so from there, you could it's a lot easier to understand where it's acceptable to sort of come to compromises and so forth. But we got a lot of bad examples of compromising leaderships. We can go into politics. We can go anywhere. But what about you, man? You've always had a solid core of principles. Why don't you talk to that?
Yeah, man. Just along those same lines, my faith is the core of my essence. That everything I do is based upon my faith. Now, I am a Christian unashamedly. I believe in Jesus Christ, and I'm not ashamed about it. And so, and understanding that and walking through the Word of God and living by the Word of God, I try to base my values and my principles upon that. And that really is where the unselfish aspect comes from, because let's be honest, by human beings, we're selfish by nature. Let's be honest. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. Black, white, Hispanic, we're selfish by nature. But the reality is that if we're going to live upon the faith that I'm speaking of, then it is a selfless act. And I love how you said about the foundation. That is so critical. Everything that you see in life is built upon a structure. A house has a foundation. A car has a foundation. A car you can have an engine, but if you don't have the tires, you don't have the foundation, that car's not going anywhere.
Amen.
And so a lot of times in life, people are on the wrong path and they're on the wrong trajectory because the foundation is whack. The foundation is off. The Bible talks about that man that built his house upon the sand, and then there was a man that built his house upon the rocks. And when the wind came and the storm came, the one who built his house upon that sand foundation, he wasn't able to stand the test of time because his foundation was weak. It couldn't stand against the winds of life. And that's what we see now. Bro, we're in the middle of a pandemic. There's a lot going on, and your foundation has been exposed. A lot of people are not able to survive through this time of what we're going in. It's because they're not built on a good foundation. And that is critical to leadership. We see different leaders. You see your foundation based upon your actions. I'm not here to cast aspersions upon anybody or talk negative against any leader, whether you're Republican, Democrat, God bless you. But that foundation will be exposed. And let me just say this, when it comes to politics, bro, you and I have had a lot of conversations on that. I've come to discover that both wings belong to the same bird. So whether you're a Republican, Democrat, conservative, uh, non-bipartisan, whatever you consider yourself to be, a socialist, there's a motive behind everybody. And so we just have to make sure that our motives are correct and our motives are pure. And it's hard to find that in leadership. And it can be very tough, especially when we're talking about the compromising leadership, um, because you're trying to make the right decision, but sometimes the right decision can, how can I say it? It could be the wrong decision in someone else's eyes, but you know it's the right decision. But the reality is this is why I try to tell myself, you can't please everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You can't please everybody.
Yeah. I think some people even come in position with the right intentions.
Yeah.
But then the association, that could be a whole other talk. The association often makes the immorality or the compromising behaviors a norm,
Yeah.
which is really when you can really get into politics. And then it's almost, it's normal to do this. And
Right.
wow, if you, in your first few months in politics, this might have seemed like, whoa, this is not how we operate.
Yeah.
But after a while, you almost forget that where your core foundation was and your non-compromising principles.
Yeah.
And you forget about that stuff, and then it becomes just normal to make these decisions that affect a lot of lives. So, and that can be anywhere. That can be in a company, right? That can be in leadership at a company. There's a lot of leaders that lose their way as they build their business or they grow within a company, and maybe leadership within that company loses their way a little bit. That's when you find all the news scandals and so forth. Most people, I think, at the core are good. I just think they've, God doesn't make junk. So, everybody starts off great. Kids and everything. I don't believe in bad kids. I just think there's kids that have lost their way and unfortunately probably due to bad leadership in the house. But
Absolutely, bro. Absolutely. And so I want to pose kind of the opposite, and maybe we could dig into this a little deeper with that compromise piece. Because do you think that there's no room for compromise? Because we talked about the negative aspect of compromise, but then there's another part of compromise that says, okay, as a leader, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the solutions. And I remember you and I had a conversation a while back, and you told me that a leader is like a duck in water. And I never forgot this. Never forgot this. Because when people look at leaders, they think, well, they're the pastor of the church. They have all the answers. The pastor's the psychiatrist, the psychologist, the preacher, the counselor, all wrapped up in one. They have to have every answer, right? You're the CEO of the company. You know all the answers to, you got to manage the budget, manage the employees, manage everything, the infrastructure. And the reality is that leader is like that duck that's in water. When you see that duck that's in water, above water, he looks calm, cool, and collected. But if you were to go underneath the surface, it's frantic. The legs are moving at a fast pace because it's just trying to stay above water. And that's what leadership is. And so there's a piece to leadership that I'm thinking there has to be a positive compromise. And what I mean by that is that, just in any company, whether in church, you've got a board, you've got a group of advisors, that you will have those people in your ear that says, hey, man, that may not be the right move. That may not be the right decision. Let's look at that a little deeper. Let's look at that a little further. And so you're willing to compromise in the aspect of listening and lending your ear to find another solution that might be better for the overall betterment of that group or whatever that context that you are currently serving in leadership. What do you think about that aspect of compromise, or would you call it something else?
No, I'm right with you. First of all, on that same aspect of, hopefully you have good association on those boards and so forth, and no personal agendas. That's a big thing. But for me, it's got to start off with those non-negotiables. I'm sorry. how I look at it is, okay, if you have a goal or a mission or whatever, if that's at risk, it's typically the issue could be you see it in government and churches and stuff all the time where something's not getting done because two sides of people can't come to an agreement on what to do, so you're just stuck. So is that at risk? Yes. Okay. And then the next, as the leader though, you have to decide, okay, is the issue at hand or the disagreement part of my non-negotiables.
Yeah.
If it's a non-negotiable, then you have to hold to those non-negotiables. Otherwise, you start to compromise. Now, your non-negotiables, though, should, like I said, those should be core standards of like life. It's not just like, well, I like green no matter what, so the logos will always be a hint of green, right? That's right. It's more like, we don't ever treat people this way, and that would cause us to do that, so we will never go that direction. Right? And so if you're like, okay, we may not complete our goal, and with that, so we got to figure something out, and it's not part of the non-negotiables, then you have to decide, okay, so how important is this detail that we're having an issue over, and is it, in each party has to decide that, and is the issue part of, so is it supporting my personal agenda? Is that the reason?
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, I heard it on this radio show once, a lot of times people, we get this approval addiction. It's where,
whoa.
Yeah, well,
too fast, John, too fast.
Sorry. I'll hold that back.
Approval addiction. Say that again.
Well, we get approval addiction.
Approval addiction.
Yeah. And so a lot of times we want to always be right, right? And I'm with you, man. I hate being wrong. Just ask my beautiful wifey. Just don't like it. It's true. She's amazing, and and she'll tell you. Nobody likes to be wrong.
Nobody likes to be wrong.
But it takes a real humble person to admit that. But people have to stop trying to always be right and just focus on getting things right? Ooh. Which will really, I think, help with the compromise. Like, let's just get this right, not try to each be correct. Because then if you're a little bit off, you're trying to justify, right? Why? Well, yes, it's supposed to be that way, but think of it my way. And you always try. And then you go into this justification mode, which is, and then you start making up stories, making up lies, and then you end up in DC. So, and so like that's, anyways, yeah. Let's just focus on getting it right as leaders in the community. And I think if you go in that with the right heart, you're gonna do great.
You said so many good points in what you just said, man. I had to pull out my phone and type this down in my notes. You talked about people that are addicted to being right, and that our focus should shift from stop trying to be right and let's get things right. That's powerful, because my mind started thinking just within the context of church and work. You talked about that there are some people that have those non-negotiables that it may sound silly, like you said, my favorite color is green, and so the logo of the company has to be great. When we print out papers from the printer, that whatever we pass out has to have some form of green on it. And we find that in church, because because of the pandemic has forced companies, it has forced churches to make a shift in their structure. In some companies, some churches were not able to make that shift because I'm not willing to go against what I know or what I think is right, instead of trying to get things right for the betterment of everybody else. And so instead of coming to the church that's brick and mortar and, that's the only way we can have church, that's what's right. Instead of saying, hey, we can have a cyber sanctuary. We don't need 4 walls to worship God. We can create an altar anywhere. Instead of having our meetings for the company in person and wasting everybody's time traveling here and there, we can set up the meetings on Zoom. But some people are unwilling to do that because they're concerned about what's right to them instead of doing the things that's right for everybody else. it's that approval addiction that you say. I love that so much. I'll have to unpack that, and if I use it in a sermon, I'll credit you for that.
Oh, thanks, man. I'll be famous.
But that is so real, and I think that has to be broken through a process of saying, you know what, I'm the type of person that I like to be right. I, I like to be in control. I'm a type of, I like to be in control, bro. I don't like people driving me. I don't like trusting people to do this. I don't like really asking people to do things for me because I like to be in control.
Yeah.
But the reality is that no man is an island. And if you're going to be successful through life, we need each other. And in order to get to that place the way we say we need each other, we have to get out of the mindset that I'm always right. Or, you know, I have this certain degree behind my name and I've been to here and I live here and I make this much here. And so my ideas are always right. Or, you know, where we come from is always right, or your perspectives is always wrong. It's because we have that approval addiction. Wow, that really blessed me, man.
Oh.
Wow. And so I know we talked at the beginning about we laid the foundation of leadership and what it was. But I'm looking at the notes here, and you had put a note. You asked the question, why is leadership important? Why is leadership important? And if you don't have a leader, how do you know where you're going? In any successful movement, in any successful anything in life that goes anywhere forward, there's always a leader. And so why do you think leadership is important? I know that you've probably already answered this, but just give me your perspective of why you thought that was important to put down.
You know, I think the without a leader, there's typically no direction. So, and if you're not moving forward, you're automatically moving backwards, right? There's no steps. Life is more like an escalator. It's always moving. It's not really a stair. You know what I mean? You're not just standing still. You're progressing or you're declining all the time. Sometimes faster, sometimes slower.
Wow.
But it's constant, right? And life is so fast right now. And it just gets faster and faster, and it's really easy to get caught up in it. And so, yeah, I think the leader just has to be there, always the one sort of putting out the vision, right? Here's what we can do, and not just being the guy. So so many people in leadership want to be like the spotlight, right? And I've always taught people that, you know, your job is to, as a leader, is to be more like a mirror, right? I mean, when something bad happens, let me take it back. When something bad happens, it's on you, right? As the leader and the protector of the people you're leading, right? Just fall on the sword for them, and they will do anything for you. But on the reverse side, as you know, the attaboys and the accolades come in, you're a mirror, and you reflect that back onto your team, your organization, your church, whatever. And you just have to be confident enough in your own skin, within yourself, to realize that I don't need to like live in the limelight. I can just, right? My ring light is good enough. And so just put it on your team. A lot of them really they need it, man. They love it. They work hard for you. I just heard a quote from a guy. Most people have probably heard of Gary Vee all the time. And he's a business guy. I'm not promoting him necessarily. Just he had said something that said, you know, most CEOs think their employees work for the CEO. He said, I think that I work for them. And that's the difference. And I was like, total mind shift. Like I heard that and I thought instantly changed. Thought, wow, that's a whole mindset shift. And that goes from now appreciating everybody who's been following you all that time.
Absolutely. And I love how you said that leadership is not about the spotlight. Because the reality is that many people think that leadership always means you're out front. But there are a lot of people that do work behind the scenes that if they didn't do what they did behind the scenes, there would be no production. There would be no show. There would be no sponsors. There would be no church if the people didn't do what they did behind the scenes. You know, people often think, oh, the janitor, he's less than the CEO. Not at all. Because if the facility is not clean, And if the structure is not appeasing to the eye, nobody's coming. And so leadership is not about rank, it's about servitude. Just as you said, it is not about, oh, well, I'm the CEO and my employees work for me. No, I work for them. Because the reality is that if you get caught up in the limelight, you'll find out really quickly that those lights are very bright. And if you are not equipped, if you are not called, if you are not designated to serve in that capacity, those lights will burn you. And you'll experience what they call burnout, or I don't feel like I can do it anymore. A lot of that is not because we're out of energy or we've been working so hard, is that you're not equipped or you're not called to serve in that capacity because you thought that it was about the fanfare and being featured on flyers and being featured on social media. When the reality is that leadership is hard work. Leadership is servitude, and anybody that serves in a restaurant, let's just take a restaurant example. For example, those who serve as servers in a restaurant, you put your apron on every time you go to work. And when you put your apron on and work, you start off the day, your apron is nice and clean. It may be white, but by the time that you're done into your shift and you're done serving, when you go home, you leave with mess and stains and dirt on you. That's not your mess. And that's exactly what leadership is. The mess and the dirt that we have to work through oftentimes is not something that we've caused as leaders, but it's by the people that we are serving. And the Bible talks about how you should serve the Lord with gladness. That's how we should serve the context that we've been called to. Whether you've been called to lead a group of 50, 10, or a group of 500 or 5,000, you shouldn't have in your mind, well, this will be more joyous for me if I was pastoring, if I was leading a church of 500 or 200, rather than that pastor that's just called to have 50 or 20. You should do both, because it should never be about the audience. We're all supposed to be doing this for the audience of one, right? And that is for God, be pleasing to him. And so, man, I thought that was so good about being caught up in the limelight of leadership. Did you have anything else, bro?
Yeah, so we talk on this leadership thing. We've been talking a lot, and I've been mentioning a lot in respect to, and I don't necessarily intend it that way, but I think we refer a lot of examples to like what we would consider like top leadership, right?
Yeah.
But really, people have to understand their leadership role within all like levels of life, and we all are leaders in different areas. So my house is a house of 4 people and 2 dogs, and so there's not like there's this giant organization in my home that you're trying to lead, right? And almost everybody who's listening is the same way, right? You have to start with yourself first of all, right? Lead yourself.
Yeah.
And once you learn to lead yourself, I think God will bless you with spouse and kids if that's what you desire, right? Yeah. And then but then when you can effectively lead that, you'll be blessed with much more, just like finances or anything like that, right? Take care of one, you get blessed with much more. So forth. And so while we do mention companies and church leaders and like leaders of churches, it starts at home and in the living room. So
that's so good, man. I never heard anybody put it in the perspective of, before you're leading anybody else, you got to learn how to lead yourself. And that is from the perspective of, I know what I believe, I know what I stand on, and I'm not going to waver from that. And so I'm not going to go out there and try to tell anybody else something to live by that I'm not doing myself. That famous cliche we say, you're just preaching to the choir at that point. And it's falling on deaf ears. And so learning to lead yourself, and like you said, it starts at home. It starts at home. And a lot of what we're seeing is that a lot of people don't have a lot of home training. And so it shows that when you go out to try to lead a group of people, your lack of training and lack of discipline that should have started. And it's a part of that foundation again. We're going back to the foundation. It starts at home. Do you have anything else, bro?
Now with the home thing, man, we could talk all day about leadership and the home. One of my favorite poems is it's an unknown author, but it's called The Little Chap That Follows Me. It basically talks about, and I have it, I keep it right over here to my left on a bookshelf. I give it to all like new dads and stuff. I give it out all the time. It's just about being the example, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
you be the example, and your kids will follow you. So yeah,
Absolutely.
there's no do as I say, not as I do. It's watch me do
Yeah.
as I do. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I say this all the time, and I don't know who I heard it from, an older person, but they said, I see better than I hear. So I
Yeah.
hear you saying what you do. I hear you saying a lot of these words, and they sound
Hmm.
great. A lot of promises that you say, but I see better than I hear. And so people follow you by what they see more than by what they hear.
Yeah. In business, we say when you're trying to mentor and uplift people, we say listen to what they say, then watch what they do. If
Mm,
what they say lines up with what they do, then you have a potential leader to groom if you're talking about companies. If it differs, then there could be some work. It's not perfect. Nobody's 100%. Give them some grace.
yeah,
But yeah, what do they say, and then what do they do after that? Same thing.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, man, listen, I've enjoyed, this is our first episode,
Yeah, man.
and I think that the conversation went well, talking about compromising leadership, talking about the foundation of leadership, why leadership is important, and that everyone's a leader. And our prayer is that those that would listen to this is just the beginning. This is just our first episode. We're going to get deeper and deeper each week by various topics. And we want you all that will tune in, whether you watch this via Facebook. This will also be available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Google Podcasts. So we have various platforms, and you also can find our page also on Facebook. Follow us, follow John LeBron. You'll see all types of leadership and motivational content on his page, all positivity. Follow me on Facebook. The guys that you see here, this is real life for us. And so follow us on Facebook, also on Instagram at Unscripted Leadership, at LeBron613, and then at Lafayette B. Lane. And you'll see all that information on the bottom of your screen there. You can find us on any social media platform. Also on Facebook, we are under Unscripted Authentic Leadership. We have enjoyed this episode. We pray that you all have been blessed by this, and we will see you all next week. This has been Unscripted. Until next week, God bless you.